So on this episode, I'm going to teach you my strategy on how you can retire at least 25 years faster, retire rich 25 years faster than traditional retirement advice. What's up, family? Welcome back to another episode of Financial Freedom Fast Lane. And you know the vibes. The quicker you get to your dream life, the longer you get to live it. And I'm your host, George Achimpong. This show is called Financial Freedom Fast Lane. So I thought it was only right to give my new listeners, I believe I did talk about my strategy on closer to episode 1, the first time we aired it, but it's been a while. I'm gonna give you guys some more tangible context on how to retire 3 times faster than traditional financial advice. Because essentially that's how the show was formed, was me giving you me giving you insights on investing and business. And in my opinion, not pigeonholing myself, because I think all of these things are relevant to getting there faster, right? You just take bits and pieces of it. But I wanted to give you the full framework, and then you guys can kind of insert what makes the most sense for you so that you can adopt this formula for yourself, right? So let's get into it. So my sister is retiring at the end of this month. She's retiring at the end of this month in 2023, in December. So as of this recording, this should be airing in December, and she is retiring on December 31st. Now, my sister was probably my second or third client, and this is probably over 11 years ago when I was just getting started in the financial services industry. But I'm like, hey, if you trust me, I'm learning some really cool stuff. I think it'll be beneficial for you. Now, at that time, I didn't have the exact blueprint, right? I just was making sure that she was investing, putting money away, and started to develop a plan for retirement. But as I learned more, as I got more well-versed in the space, I then applied that to her strategy so that she was ultimately able to retire 25 years faster than traditional retirement advice. Retirement advice, I guess you could say. So my sister just turned 40 in October, and most people, or the traditional retirement age, is age 65. And truth be told, at age 65, that's just the age that people retire. It's not necessarily like people retiring rich or having the financial wherewithal to do what they want to do. In fact, the median retirement account balance is actually less than $200,000 for most people, right? And so it's wait, so if I understand anything about how retirement works, which I'll get into in this episode, then that is not nearly enough. So what is the actual process? What is the actual blueprint for retiring rich 3 times faster? All right, let's get into it. But before we do that, we have to unpack some myths, right? We have to do some unlearning. The first thing we have to unlearn is that retirement is based upon age, right? It's not based upon age, it's based upon assets. I just proved that. My sister's retiring at 40, right? So it has nothing to do with age. It has everything to do with assets. And more specifically, right, the traditional retirement model is that you have to have 25 times, right, your annual income need invested in order to retire, right? So if you ask the average person, they say they need about $1 million to retire. But if you back into that math, that translates to about $40,000 a year. So if you want to figure out what your number is, you take how much money you think you'll need a month to live your desired lifestyle. You multiply that by 12, which is just the calendar year. And then ultimately you multiply that by 25. And maybe on another episode, I'll get into the specifics of the formula, but this is something that has been, thought about years before this show ever existed. And it's a formula that if you follow, most likely you will not run out of money in retirement as long as you withdraw just 4% from your portfolio, right? So you couple this multiplying your retirement income need by 25 with only withdrawing 4%. And that is the old model for the recipe for not running out of money. Now, here's the good news. The good news is my sister has achieved that financial milestone as well. So even following the traditional financial advice, she's good to go, right? But what I realize is that most people, as I've articulated, aren't going to be able to follow the traditional path, right? And even if they do follow that path, it's not going to allow them to hit their target. And when you think about retirement from the vantage point of age or accumulation, then what it does is it makes you think that you have to put all this time in. But the reality is, it's just like the goal is, how can I get to that number faster? If we were even going that route, and by the end of this episode, you'll know that that's not the route we're going. But even if that was our goal, if our goal was, okay, if I know I need $1 million saved at retirement to live my ideal lifestyle, right? Then what is the fastest path to get there? Now, the fastest path to get there is making more money, right? Because we now know that retirement has nothing to do with age. It's like, how quick can I get to the $1 million? So if I'm making $50,000 a year and I can only save and invest 10% of my income, then I'm only investing $5,000 a year, right? And that's why it's taking me 35 years to do it, because of the amount of money that I'm allocating. Conversely, if I made $100,000 a year and then I double my savings rate, okay, I double my income, so let me double my savings rate. So I go from saving and investing 10% a year on 50,000 to saving and investing 20% a year on 100,000. Now, the magic in this is that you go from investing $5,000 a year to investing $20,000 a year. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to see, okay, well, if I'm able to do that, then I'm naturally going to get to that timeline significantly faster, right? And that is true. But what I realize is that's only scratching the surface, because it's still focusing on accumulation, right? And in my mind, having $1 million invested and only being able to safely distribute $40,000 a year, or that's what it can produce, right? And me not run out of money, it just seemed a little bit inefficient, right? Now, the caveat to that is, once you accumulate that $1 million, every dollar that comes from that portfolio is passive. So it's not that big of a deal, right? Every dollar that comes from that portfolio is passive. So at the end of the day, like, you shouldn't expect the same rate of return, right? Or the same like amount of income, right, from your active income as you would from something passive, right? Because you're not trading any time for it. So it's not that it's bad. It's just that, is there a more efficient way for the person who, may not make $100,000, right? And is still trying to get to retirement in a reasonable timeline? And the answer is yes, right? So instead of focusing on accumulating as much money as you can, as fast as you can, right? What we then want to focus on is understanding that cash flow is more important than accumulation. And what do I mean by that? Now, you accumulated the $1 million in this example over whatever length of time it took you to accumulate it, so that it could produce the 40,000. But really, you don't really care about the million, right? It sounds nice. I mean, who wouldn't want to have $1 million invested? But what you really care about is the $40,000 in cash flow, or whatever your cash flow number is. So then the question becomes, what are more efficient ways to produce said cash flow, right? So I implore you to look into things like real estate, right? Not to say that investing in the stock market and getting passive income from that is bad. I love the stock market. That's where a lot of my money is invested. But it's to say, maybe that's not the end all be all or the only thing I should consider investing in. So maybe I should look into, well, what type of cash flow could I generate from a short-term rental property or a long-term rental property or multifamily? Because it's about the cash flow number. Now, again, there are other variables that you have to consider in terms of who's going to manage the property. What is the net profit margins? Is this as passive? Does this align with my wealth building and lifestyle alignment, right? Those are questions you got to answer for yourself. But ultimately, when we just look at it from a dollars and cents standpoint, if I was a betting man, I would bet that it would be easier for you to wrap your head around having an investment property that can produce $1,100 a month, right, in cash flow, in this example, than how much money you'd have to have invested to produce that same amount of money. So you need $330,000 invested, right, to produce $1,100 a month passively, right? That just sounds like a big grab. So when you hear it out loud, it's like, wait, might not know everything about business. I might not know everything about real estate, but I'm pretty sure that I'm smart enough to figure out how to generate $36 a day, right, passively, right? And we don't have to get into the specifics of what those options are. Maybe I'll do another episode on that. But just fundamentally, you could agree with me on that, right? So then the question becomes, what things can I do that could generate cash flow, right, at higher yields than following the traditional 4% rule? And what you'll find is that it's very, very doable. One of my other favorite ways to do this is investing in businesses that you own but do not run, which buying the laundromat, buying the car wash, buying the lawn care business, buying the business that a small business owner owns and they're ready to retire, right? Because there's a lot of cash flow in that. You might be asking yourself again, well, how can I buy a business? And I don't have the time to get into it on this episode because it's a whole topic in itself. But I want you to understand that you can go to websites like buybizsell.com or flippa.com and you can literally find companies to buy. You can drive around your city and look at these businesses that have been ran for years, dry cleaning, car washes, etc. And the problem is, like, their kids saw them or their family saw them work that business tooth and nail for 30, 40 years, and they don't want to take over that business, right? Like dad, worked himself to the bone. Yes, this business is producing cash flow, but I don't want to run it, right? And so what ends up happening is these businesses, just like houses, end up going potentially left abandoned. So, and these owners, they want to retire, right? So it's like, how can you create a win-win scenario where you get a chance to buy this business from them, place an operator in place, and then ultimately, right, be able to now buy income? Because if you haven't figured it out yet, that is the name of the game. You want to take your active income and you want to buy income. Because when you buy income, then you buy back time. That is the whole game. That is the entire game, right? So anyways, more of the story is, how can you find these cash flow producing investment opportunities, whether it's real estate or private equity? Because I only look at investing in three major buckets: private markets, public markets, like the stock market. Private markets is like, again, buying these businesses that aren't publicly traded, and then real estate. Those are the three main markets I look at. And then within those, there's different subsets, right? Like in the private markets, there's venture capital, there's angel investing, right? There's et cetera, et cetera. And then of course the public markets, you got foreign exchange, you got the stock market, you got, all types of, public markets, right? So you can figure out within those like sectors or within those buckets, which one you want to focus on. But what I believe is that between owning a business that you don't run, owning a business that you don't have to run, and real estate, you can find some great cash flow producing opportunities. So you might be thinking, well, I should probably just abandon the stock market. Well, not so fast. The stock market is probably one of the greatest tools for passive wealth generation, right? It's probably one of the greatest tools for passive wealth generation. But the challenge is the cash flow, right? How can I get this thing to produce more cash flow? So this is when myth number 3 comes into play. So let's just do a quick recap. Myth number 1 is that at the end of the day, retirement is not based on age, it's based on assets. Myth number 2 is that you have to understand that it's not about accumulation, it's about cash flow, right? And then myth number 3 is that debt is bad, right? Consumer debt is bad. If I go out and swipe my credit card for things that take money out of my bank account that inherently don't bring, money back to me, that's a liability. And if I use debt to do it, it's really bad, right? But if I borrow money to buy something that will appreciate in value, and what it appreciates to is greater than what it costs to borrow the money, and there's some left over, that's good. So what does that look like in practical application? If I borrow money to go buy a house, let's say I borrowed $100,000 to go buy a house, right? At 6% interest. And then that house grew to $200,000 in value over, I'm just going to use just an arbitrary example, right? Over 10 years time, right? And let's say that the cost of capital during that 10 years it cost me, let's just call it $25,000, arbitrary. And on top of that, the appreciation of the house, growing from 100,000 to 200, it also produced $1,100 in cash flow every single month. So every single month, for 10 years, right? Now, in that example, I could easily do the math and I would take that deal every day of the week and twice on Sunday. But the problem is people don't do the math and they get scared and they're afraid of debt. And they listen to people who tell them that debt is bad. Now, let me say this, because I know I probably get Dave Ramsey gets a lot of flack, right? And not just because of his message on debt freedom, but because of his delivery, and people maybe don't resonate with it, right? I don't disagree with Dave Ramsey in the sense that if you are irresponsible with money, right? i.e., if you don't have a track record of being able to put money on a credit card and pay it off 100%, right? Then you probably shouldn't have a credit card. So Dave Ramsey has a teaching style that helps save you from yourself, right? People that are probably already drowning, who don't need the fancy bells and whistles, who don't need to leverage anything. Like, you're already over leveraged. You're not responsible. You haven't proven that you know what to do with this money, right? So in that sense, I agree with Dave, and Dave has helped a tremendous amount of people, and no one can deny that, right? But there's a difference between playing to win, right, and playing not to lose, right? And if you are not responsible with money, then maybe you do need to play not to lose. You got to put a certain amount of guardrails and defenses in place to prevent you from making bad decisions and saving you from yourself. But once you've gotten past that and you're financially responsible, right, then you can exercise these different things that will help you get to your target faster. So what does that look like in practical application? And where does the stock market come back into this scenario? So what I do is I invest money in the stock market, right? Instead of my bank account, the money has to go somewhere. So I let my money that has to be accumulated go somewhere, and that somewhere is the stock market. And yes, the stock market can go up, it can go down, it can fluctuate. But by and large, the stock market over an extended period of time has a 100% success rate, assuming you're buying broadly diversified funds, right? If you buy a single company and it goes belly up, yes, you're not going to necessarily have a 100% success rate. But if you go and buy VOO or another total stock market index, right? History has said that over an extended period of time, you will win 100% of the time. That being said, what I do is I invest my money in the stock market. And what the stock market will allow you to do, if it's invested in a taxable brokerage account, and with most institutions, they will let you use your account as collateral, right? Now, what does that mean? What that means is if I have $10,000 invested, this investment institution can see that I have the $10,000 invested. And so they will give me a line of credit based upon the portfolio value. Let's just call it up to 40%. You have 10,000, I'll give you a line of credit for 4,000. Now, what's interesting about this is your $10,000 never gets liquidated, right? Like, you still have the $10,000 portfolio. It still gets to grow at whatever rate it's currently growing at. All right. As of this recording, my portfolio year to date is just up shy over 56%, right? But the beautiful part about it is now my portfolio gets to grow uninterrupted. I get a line of credit based upon the value of my portfolio, and I can then take that line of credit to go buy more what? Investments. Not stuff, but more investments. So now I got one investment that's growing, and then I take the other money, right, to go buy another investment, right? Ideally one that produces cash flow. So now I got two investments, but then I take the cash flow and then I reinvest it into my portfolio. So now I have three uses for the money, right? I got my original money that was invested. I got a line of credit that used to go buy another asset that's also growing and appreciating in value. But then also I get cash flow from it, and I take that cash flow and I reinvest it back into my portfolio, right? Now, of course, if you're at a place where you're ready to be financially independent, you can take that cash flow to subsidize your lifestyle, right? But assuming you were still trying to get to your freedom number and the money had to go somewhere and you were still working, you could take that money and reinvest it. So now you are getting three uses for your money, right? Three uses for your money, right, off of one original investment. Not to mention that the IRS does not consider loans as income, right? So if you get a $4,000 line of credit against the value of your portfolio, that is not going to be a taxable event. In fact, you will be able to deduct the loan interest, right? It has got to be the closest thing to legal money laundering I've ever seen in my life. Because here's the thing you got to realize. The tax code is something that everybody has to follow. So the problem is most people just don't understand it. So when the tax code was written, And these legislators get to change the tax code. Like, ooh, I'm going to put this thing in there that benefits me, right? We're all going to decide to put this thing in there. Again, I don't know, like if they're in some secret room and this is how it's happening. But the more the story is, if I have to follow the code, right, then I need to make sure that it can benefit me. And so they put these things in there, these loopholes, right, that are meant to be exploited. It's not about tax evasion or doing anything illegal. It's literally a part of the tax code. And you just leverage the tax code, right, in order to do it for your benefit. And that, my friends, is how I help people build wealth 3 times faster than traditional retirement advice. My sister is retiring 25 years faster based upon my advice and her hard work. Shout out to sis, right? Because information, right? If it's just about information, we'd all be billionaires with 6-packs. So yes, I think that I'm a great advisor and a great educator, but if you, right, don't take action on the information, then it's useless, right? So shout out to her for taking action. But if you follow that methodology, you'll be able to retire rich and retire successfully a lot faster than the Instagram guru that's telling you invest $300 a month for 40 years and then eventually you'll be retired. Like, give me a virtual show of hands if you're like, I'm not waiting 35 years to become financially free. Like, who wants to wait that long? You want to be on the beach when you still got the 6-pack, or you can still at least still try to get it, right? So we got to figure out a faster way. And that's why I created Financial Freedom Fast Lane. Because like I always say, the quicker you get to your dream life, the longer you get to live it. So let me just recap for y'all, right? Number 1, it's not about age, it's about assets. The more income you make and the more you can allocate to those assets, the faster you can get to your financial goals, right? So you should be asking yourself, how can I side hustle? How can I make more money? How can I be a better steward over my finances so I can get money to the asset side of the balance sheet faster, right? More important than that, I have to find ways to invest in things that produce cash flow, because it's much easier to get to my cash flow target than it is to get to my accumulated target. You still want to work towards both, right? But it's much easier to get to your cash flow target. But since you got to put your money anywhere, right? Myth 3 is that debt is bad. I'm going to invest in the stock market. I'm going to leverage my portfolio's collateral, and I'm going to use that leverage to acquire more assets, ideally assets that produce cash flow. And then until I'm ready to use that cash flow to live on, I'm going to reinvest it so that it can grow too. All right. So that is my tried and true strategy. I hope that you use this strategy in order to achieve financial independence faster. If you want me to go deeper on this, or if you want to hear more about it, 1, you can join our community, the Melanin Millionaires Club. It'll be linked in the show notes. Or 2, you can join one of our free classes that we typically do almost every week, right? Just click the link in my social calendar, in my bio, right? Or click the link in the show notes to see when the next class is. Other than that, guys, thanks so much for tuning in to another episode. If you think this information was helpful, please share it with a friend. Please leave me a comment, right? I am performing on an invisible stage. I don't get to see any reaction. I don't know if you like it. The only way I know if you like it is if you literally like it, or if you leave a nice little comment, or if you share it. And most importantly, if you subscribe to the channel. We're giving out free game every single week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, rain, sleet, snow, or hail. All we're asking is that you engage with us so that we can know that it's valuable. Thank you so much for tuning in. And remember, freedom is for sale if you're willing to pay the price.